Greenland is over 830,000 square miles, but fewer than 60,000 people live there. That's like taking all of France and removing nearly everyone. It's the largest island in the world, yet it ranks 207th in population. In mid-2025, estimates put Greenland's population at around 55,745 people, scattered across a few towns hugging the icy coastline. That works out to a population density of just 0.03 people per square kilometer, making it the least densely populated place on Earth. Some recent reports show small fluctuations: 55,840 in 2024, 55,800 in early 2025, and one estimate even reaching 57,000. But the overall trend is clear. Greenland's population is either holding steady or slowly shrinking, with a projected yearly drop of about 0.17% in 2025. So what's keeping people away? Why does such a massive stretch of land remain so empty, while other places, much smaller, are packed with millions? In this video, we'll explore the real reasons, from geography and climate to culture and survival, behind why so few people live in Greenland. Reason 1. Dominance of the ice sheet. That tiny population starts to make more sense once you look at the land itself. Greenland is dominated by the Greenland ice sheet, which, along with its many glaciers, covers between 80% and 88% of the island's total surface. This ice sheet spans up to 1,755,637 square kilometers and can be as much as 3.5 kilometers thick in some places. That leaves only about 410,449 square kilometers of ice-free land, an area similar in size to Sweden. But even this land is not fully usable. Only a small portion of it is arable or suitable for human settlement. In practice, people live along the coastline, mostly in the southern part of the island where conditions are somewhat more manageable. All 80 settlements in Greenland are located by the sea, where transportation is possible by boat or over ice during the long winters. More than 98% of Greenland is considered uninhabitable. Too barren, too remote, too hostile, and in many cases, life-threatening for long-term living. This extreme lack of livable land is one of the most basic and powerful reasons why Greenland's population remains so small. Reason 2. Harsh climate. Another key reason for Greenland's small population lies in its extreme climate. Most of the island experiences a polar climate, with winter temperatures dropping to minus 50 degrees Celsius and summer temperatures rarely rising above 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. The average surface air temperature year-round is minus 18.75 degrees Celsius, making daily life cold even by Arctic standards. Climate conditions vary across the island. The south is subarctic. The southwest, maybe where most people live, is low Arctic with snowy winters and wet summers. And the north is high Arctic with very cold, dry winters and little precipitation. Unlike Iceland, Greenland receives little benefit from the Gulf Stream, so winters are not only colder but also longer and darker. Much of the island lies above the Arctic Circle, meaning some regions go through months of total darkness in winter. Living in these conditions comes with high costs. Infrastructure must be specially designed to prevent pipes and systems from freezing, which drives up expenses. Transportation is difficult and limited, and farming is nearly impossible outside small-scale greenhouse efforts. Even small changes in temperature can cause major problems, such as the May 2025 heat wave that triggered permafrost melt, damaged roads, and released metals into Arctic lakes, threatening water quality. Reason 3. Unsteady ice, uncertain future. Another major obstacle to living in Greenland is the constant shift of ice and permafrost. As the climate warms, permafrost is melting, which causes iron and other metals to leak into Arctic lakes, raising serious concerns about drinking water and environmental safety. At the same time, warmer temperatures are breaking up sea ice earlier and more often, making it harder for communities to hunt, fish, or travel, which directly affects food supplies and daily life. Some parts of the northern and northeastern coast are locked in sea ice all year, completely blocking ships from reaching them. In many other areas, seasonal sea ice limits travel and transport for long stretches of the year. So while Greenland may look like open coastline on the map, much of it is inaccessible for long periods of time. Climate change has opened up some new economic possibilities like shipping routes or resource extraction, but these come with a price. Thawing ground damages infrastructure, and the loss of stable sea ice disrupts traditional ways of living. Reason 4. History. Greenland's low population isn't just a modern issue, it's been this way for over 1,000 years. The island's extreme environment has made it difficult for any large group to survive long-term. In the 10th century, Norse settlers arrived from Norway and tried to build farming communities in the south. They brought crops and animals suited for Europe, not the Arctic, and cleared land for grazing. But when the climate cooled during the Little Ice Age, their farms failed, and they couldn't adjust their way of life. By the late 1400s, their settlements disappeared, showing that large, fixed populations are not sustainable here without constant adaptation. In contrast, Inuit communities survived by staying small and mobile, following the seasons and the wildlife. Their flexible lifestyle matched the land, but it also meant living in scattered, low-density groups. This long history shows that even when people found ways to live in Greenland, those ways only supported small populations. And that's still true today. Reason 5. Heavy reliance on the fishing industry and Danish subsidies. As the environment becomes more unstable, Greenland's economy faces its own kind of pressure. Over 90% of Greenland's exports come from fishing, especially cold water shrimp and halibut. Fishing also makes up about 23% of the country's economy, which means almost everything depends on the health of the ocean. But seafood prices go up and down, and warmer water can change where fish live, making income from fishing unpredictable and risky. This makes it harder for families to plan for the future or for new industries to grow. To keep things running, Greenland receives large financial support from Denmark. Over 4 billion Danish kroner in 2023, which covered about 42% of all government spending. That money helps pay for schools, hospitals, and public services, but it also means Greenland's economy is not fully independent. Without those funds, the island couldn't support its current population, let alone attract many more people. In the end, the lack of economic diversity and the need for outside help makes long-term growth uncertain and settlement limited. Reason 6. Limited economic diversification. Wholesale trade, construction, and transportation all play important roles, and the island has known potential in mining, hydroelectricity, and offshore oil. But despite these possibilities, Greenland still imports more than it exports. The economy remains small, averaging just $1.3 billion in GDP from 1970 to 2021, and most investment still comes from Denmark. A big part of the problem is scale. With a population under 60,000, Greenland has a very limited workforce and a tiny domestic market. It's a strange situation. The island holds massive reserves of rare earth elements, zinc, iron, and more, yet it struggles to build new industries. Why? Because the harsh climate, remote locations, lack of roads, and high costs make development extremely hard. Even one mining site could require flying in equipment, housing workers, and building infrastructure from scratch, all at great expense. And with recent bans on future oil exploration and uranium mining, environmental concerns are now another major roadblock to economic expansion. Reason 7. High cost of living. Greenland's remote location in the far north comes with a high price, literally. Because nearly everything must be imported, the cost of goods and services is much higher than in mainland Denmark. Basic needs like food and fuel are especially expensive, making daily life a financial challenge for many residents. For example, a family of 4 in Greenland faces estimated monthly expenses of around $5,726, not including rent. Even healthy, locally produced foods are often less affordable due to the high cost of transporting them to small, spread-out communities. This high cost of living creates economic pressure, especially for lower-income families. It also discourages new residents since the promise of work or higher wages often doesn't make up for the expenses. For people hoping to improve their lives financially, Greenland becomes a hard place to choose, and sometimes a hard place to stay. As a result, the financial burden of simply living there becomes another strong reason why the population remains so small. Reason 8. Labor shortages and workforce limitations. Another challenge Greenland faces is not having enough people to do the work. The country has a serious labor shortage, which means it increasingly depends on workers from outside. Part of the issue is education. About 50% of the population has less than a lower secondary education, limiting access to skilled jobs. With such a small population overall, there simply aren't enough local workers to fill new roles. For example, a new mining operation would struggle to hire locally and would have to bring in workers from other countries. This creates what experts call a human capital problem. Not enough trained, working-age people to support economic growth. Relying on foreign labor is expensive, and it doesn't always help the local community grow in a long-term, natural way. Even if there are job openings, the workforce is often too small, too stretched, or not trained for the needs of emerging industries. So in this way, Greenland's small and underprepared labor force limits both its economy and its ability to support more people. Reason 9. Road networks. Greenland's lack of roads makes it one of the most isolated places on Earth. Because of the harsh climate, frozen ground, deep fjords, and scattered settlements, it's nearly impossible to build long highways across the island. As of 2025, less than 100 miles of paved roads exist, and almost none connect one town to another. Instead, people travel by plane, boat, helicopter, snowmobile, or dog sled, depending on the season and location. Sea ice blocks access to many areas for months at a time. This setup means that each town works almost like its own island. Isolated, self-contained, and expensive to support. The lack of road connections raises the cost of everything, from trade and transport to healthcare and education, and makes it hard for people to move or work in different areas. Without a national road network, settlements remain small and scattered, limiting both population growth and economic cooperation across regions. Reason 10. Challenges in providing essential services. Even basic services in Greenland come with enormous challenges. Providing water, electricity, and sanitation across such a cold and rugged landscape is not just expensive, it's technically difficult. Pipes and systems often sit on top of frozen rocks or mountains and must be heated constantly to stop them from freezing. Most drinking water comes from meltwater lakes and rivers, but in some places it's still produced by melting ice flows at a cost of around 600 Danish kroner per cubic meter. Waste management has improved, but until recently, much of it involved open burning or dumping. And even today, waste must be shipped long distances to be properly handled. In rural areas, about 90% of homes still use bag toilets, which are emptied into open areas, posing serious health risks, especially in warmer months. Because towns are spread out and the weather is harsh, building and maintaining modern systems takes more time, money, and effort than almost anywhere else. That cost either falls on families through higher living expenses or must be covered by government subsidies. This makes it hard to expand into new areas, and in many cases, it limits where people can live with a safe and modern standard of living. Reason 11. Housing problems. Another major reason for Greenland's small population is the lack of adequate housing. In many towns, people face years-long waiting lists for state-owned apartments, sometimes stretching beyond 15 years. Private housing exists, but the prices are often too high for most families to afford. This shortage has roots in Greenland's colonial past. In the 1960s, Denmark built large concrete apartment blocks like the well-known Block P in an effort to centralize the population and close down smaller settlements. But these buildings were a poor fit for Greenlandic life. With tiny kitchens and no space to store or prepare traditional foods like whale, fish, and seal, they led to problems like clogged plumbing and overcrowding. Thousands of people were forcibly relocated from rural villages into these dense housing blocks, leading to serious social problems, including poverty and homelessness. Even today, many of these buildings have been torn down, despite the housing crisis, because of the harm they caused. This legacy of misguided housing policy and forced resettlement continues to shape where people live and limits the possibility of population growth across the island. Reason 12. Urbanization. As more residents move into towns, they become more dependent on imported goods, and traditional foods are eaten less often. For generations, Greenlandic diets relied on local marine life, rich in protein and fat, perfectly suited to the Arctic climate. Now, processed foods and Western-style diets are more common. And with that shift comes a loss of traditional knowledge, especially among the young. Many no longer learn how to hunt, fish, or prepare local foods, skills that once ensured survival and shaped cultural identity. This transformation began with forced relocations and modernization plans, often led by Danish authorities, which disrupted Inuit ways of life. People lost access to the tools and space needed to practice traditional trades, leading to new forms of poverty and unemployment. Though urbanization brings better services in some ways, it also replaces resilient, self-sufficient lifestyles with more fragile imported ones. The result is a population that faces modern social problems, while losing the cultural strengths that once made survival in Greenland possible. Reason 13: healthcare access and education. Without strong healthcare and education, it's hard for any place to grow, and Greenland faces challenges in both. Across the island, there's a serious shortage of doctors and nurses, and many health workers are short-term foreign hires. In remote villages, language becomes a barrier. Many residents speak Kalaallisut, but the workers may not, leading to misunderstandings and poor communication. Some healthcare workers in rural areas have limited training and can only give out medicine under a doctor's orders. And doctors are often far away. When people need advanced care, they sometimes have to travel 6 or 7 hours to Denmark, a trip that's expensive and emotionally hard. Education has similar gaps. There's only one university in all of Greenland, and high dropout rates, especially in nursing, are caused by stress, trauma, and homesickness. These problems are tied closely to Greenland's isolation and low population. It's hard to bring in or keep trained people, especially outside the capital. Without strong systems for health and learning, it's difficult to build a larger, healthier, and more self-reliant population. Reason 14: social issues. Poverty touches nearly 1 in every 6 people in Greenland, and it hits indigenous communities the hardest. Many of the country's most serious social problems, like alcoholism, depression, and suicide, are closely tied to poverty and stress. Overcrowded housing and even homelessness in towns make these problems worse, especially when families share tight spaces. In these living conditions, mental health issues, respiratory illness, food insecurity, and even violence become more common. It's a heavy burden for any community, and one made worse by high costs, limited job options, and weak infrastructure. For many, daily life becomes a constant struggle, and that struggle makes it harder to build stable families, find steady work, or stay hopeful. These social pressures don't just affect individuals, they slow down the entire country's ability to grow and improve. In rural or indigenous communities, the damage done by past colonial policies is still being felt today. So while Greenland is vast and beautiful, the tough living conditions create barriers that keep the population small and hold many people back. Greenland's future sits at a critical crossroads. The melting of its vast ice sheet is revealing enormous opportunities, from rare earth minerals and offshore oil and gas to untapped hydropower potential. Greenland holds 39 of the 50 critical minerals identified by the United States, and the government aims for 85% green electricity by 2030. At the same time, Greenland has already banned new oil exploration and uranium mining, showing strong local resistance to environmentally risky development. Tourism is growing quickly, supported by new international airports in Nuuk, Ilulissat, and soon Qaqortoq. In 2024, tourism made up nearly 5% of GDP and created over 1,800 jobs. But these changes bring concerns. Over-tourism, foreign ownership, rising housing pressure, and the risk of losing control over development. Greenland's long-term push for independence from Denmark depends on building a self-sustaining economy. But with a small, aging, and undereducated workforce, that remains a serious challenge. Whether these new opportunities can truly support more people, or simply bring new strains, depends on how Greenland manages growth, protection, and identity going forward. Thanks for watching. What do you think? Can Greenland build a future that supports more people without losing what makes it special? Share your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next journey.